Well, I appreciate you guys all jumping on. I know it might not be for some of you the most convenient times. We're all kind of spread out. I've looked at like where everybody's located in the community, so it's kind of difficult because it's like a give and take of like, do we try to do something in the morning or we do it at night? And it seemed like it was 50-50. So just decided to kind of go with the nighttime. That was a little more convenient for me to make sure that we stay consistent with it. But the overall idea with these events, right, is obviously you guys have been invited to the course, you're inside of that, and the overall course itself is, more or less a guide to go 0 to 1 in Salesforce. So the things that I felt were important for me when I started out, and then I've also helped out like numerous friends and family along the way, that always the same thing. And I saw, before we get into this, I saw a post today that I will probably post after this in our community that made me kind of think of this a little bit more, which is somebody that I know follows me. They took the plunge, they quit their job, they studied on Trailhead, they went through the community, they did everything. They didn't join our community, but they did everything like Trailhead and all that. And then he posted today, this person, and said that he hasn't been able to find a job. He's taken a lot of applications and he's feeling like he needs to go back to his last job. And the reason I want to bring it up is because I think that's like the big difference between like my approach and typically what a lot of other people will tell you, right? Which is, yes, you do have to be technical. That is definitely one side of it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Like getting certified is important. There's a lot of certifications out there. We need to know how to do it. It is part of the job. It will help you, but it's not the only thing. And it's not the end all be all, right? Which is in this person's case that I'm referring to, I have no idea what they've done on the other side, which is it's a 50-50 split. You got to learn one side of it, which is the technical, but the other side you have to learn is how to market yourself, right? You have to figure out what you're going to be willing to do to push the envelope. And I know for some people that's not super natural, but I would also like argue it's the same thing learning Salesforce, right? Like chances are all of us have come from a different industry, and it was extremely difficult just trying to learn what Salesforce is all about. So it's the same type of thing, in my opinion, where you have to kind of push yourself a little bit more on the marketing side and your soft skills and how you're going to get yourself out there a little bit more. Because unfortunately, that is the last thing I want anybody in this community to feel like happens to them, which is, okay, great, I took a course, I learned how to kind of do Salesforce, I studied up on the technical, but do not neglect the soft skills. And so we'll probably take some more time, maybe on our next event, to go over something like that. But without further ado, obviously, I've been just kind of saying we have a special guest. Brandon, I don't know if I can unmute you at all or if you can yourself, but we have an awesome guest, Brandon. I've worked with Brandon for a little bit of time now. He and I have communicated a lot before even this course community existed. He lives in an area that I have some family in Michigan, so kind of cool connection there. But overall, he's just been an awesome guy to get to know, and he's done an extremely great job, I would say, as far as applying a lot of the stuff that was kind of just in my head before I put it into a course format for all of you. And so I've worked a lot with Brandon through like DMs and one-on-one calls to kind of do a lot of the stuff that I'm teaching you guys. So I guess I don't want to take up your introduction here. So Brandon, do you want to tell us a little bit who you are, what industry you're coming from, and then like your journey so far into the Salesforce world?
Yeah. So I'm currently a commercial property manager, like Jordan said, here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. About, I don't know, 6-7 months ago, I heard about Salesforce on a podcast, downloaded Trailhead, and kind of started my adventure, sort of. I got lost, took sidetrack, and about January, February, I really kind of just started diving into it. And that's kind of when I first found out about Jordan, started following Jordan. And it was like drinking from a fire hydrant as far as the information he was providing, and felt like it was stuff that was very applicable, stuff that I could do. So I've been kind of going down the rabbit hole, studying, before work, after work, just anytime. I've got 4 little kids, so that takes up much of my time. But yeah, happy to say all that studying paid off. And then June, I got my certification, which is great. And I am now kind of in the job hunt process to land my first Salesforce role.
Cool. Appreciate taking some time, Brandon, to introduce yourself for us. And Brandon's now going to be a part of our community as well. So one reason I felt like it was going to be an awesome thing to bring him in is I feel like before we started this course, like we said, I used a lot of the things that I was trying to figure out what I wanted to put into a course and how I could help in a community. And a lot of those ideas I kind of went through Brandon with first, right? It's like, here's some things that we could work on. Here's like, how are things going? Has this worked for Brandon? Has it not? What does he struggle with? And so if you kind of look at Brandon, I would say he's just like all of you, just maybe a couple steps ahead is all, right? Which is he's doing the exact same stuff that all of you are doing, which is you're in a different industry. You heard about Salesforce somehow, and now we're all here trying to figure out how we get into the industry, right? So one cool thing is that with the certification being like a big talking point for all of you, I know that we have some questions that were kind of sourced, and I can start going through those. But I guess before we do that, does anyone want to kick us off with questions that you have that you want to ask Brandon live of how we kind of direct this conversation for the next hour?
Since everyone's silent, I'll speak.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm with Salesforce, and I actually am an engagement manager, and I came from operations, sales, marketing, did a lot of the operational things in contact centers, and they dragged me over into the delivery side. So I am in the process of certifying. I've been talking technical and doing product for years and years. And the first thing I did is go find your course on how to pass the certification exam. And my buddies and I have all figured out that that's a great shortcut. But the reason I'm here is I work with multiple different clients, and our clients are often not that well educated, and they're often not certified. And so I'm kind of here to learn from you. For example, your Salesforce Ben on profiles, roles, and permissions, we absolutely stole a part of what you had done to simplify explaining it to the business there and the lines of business. And I think the most important thing that we can all learn here is, I have years of trying to do this, of making the complex simple and translating technology into business. And that is the biggest challenge. And, we have lots and lots of Salesforce experts, right? Really deep, smart people. And yet the same problem keeps cropping up, which is they still don't get it. You see their eyes glaze over, etc. So I'm here to really learn from people learning, and to convey to my customers and, that learning experience and what you can do to simplify the complex and how you can translate it from tech to business. So just thought I would kick that off so that you'd have some input from someone.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's always sometimes scary to be the icebreaker when we kick off calls like this. So thanks for doing that. I appreciate it. Okay, so let's just kind of get into some conversations then. I mean, we're obviously all here that we wanted to talk about, getting certified specifically. So some of the questions that we had in our community, I want to kind of take some from, it looks like Mike. And let's ask these directly to Brandon. And then I know you guys are going through my course, so you have some idea of maybe how I would approach getting certified. But I think what would be helpful is Brandon has been super transparent on like how many attempts that he's had to go through on Focus on Force, what it realistically took him like timeline wise. So the very first one for you, Brandon, is how long were you studying for the exam? Like when did you start and when did you finally get certified?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jordan. So I took the approach after connecting with Jordan early on. I went through the entire, I think it was the Prepare for Your Salesforce admin certification on Trailhead. So I went to the entire thing. I started the process, had no idea what the heck I was doing. I was just reading and clicking and following, and it eventually started, making sense. So I did that from probably February to the end of March, so probably 2 months of that. And then once I've completed that, I purchased kind of in following Jordan, talking with him, the Focus on Force study guides and the study exams. And that just was an extension of the information that I was given or that you learn on Trailhead. It just kind of dives a little bit deeper into it. And to be quite honest with you, I haven't taken like a test, a multiple choice test in 12 to 15 years. And so for me, it was just getting comfortable answering multiple choice questions, and B, kind of learning. Salesforce kind of has a specific way that they ask questions. And it's, if you learn to read them and kind of decipher what's important and what's not important, it makes it a lot easier. And so for me, it was just repetition, just reading through stuff, learning stuff. So I probably ended up studying, I think probably 3 months from like full on studying the Focus on Force until I actually took my exam, till I personally felt comfortable. And I know people say this, but I am not a great test taker, honestly. And if I can pass it and do it, anybody can, but you do have to put in the work. It's not just, I know there's genius like test takers out there, but for the most part, you have to kind of have an idea of what you're doing to be able to pass the exam.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And it gives like more of a realistic timeline too, because I think obviously it's going to depend too, right? Like, which is how much time can you commit every single day? What does your family life look like? Are you working a job? Like all that stuff is going to factor in. So yeah, I think as far as everybody else listening, depending on all those situations, it's going to kind of fluctuate. And then Brandon, something that I know you shared on LinkedIn, but maybe people here do not know, is do you have like a rough estimate of how many times that you took the Focus on Force test before you felt like, okay, I should go take this?
I do. It was about 26 times. It was a lot. And early on it was frustrating just because it didn't feel like I was getting it. But the more you take it, like I said, the more reps you get in, the more you start to kind of understand and see how questions are asked, and you just get more comfortable with it. So when the question pops up that maybe you don't know, you don't just like deer in the headlights, like, oh crap, I don't know any of this now, And so, and that's my tendency on a test, is just to kind of freak out. So so I needed a lot personally. I don't know about you, Jordan, how many, for you that you needed to.
It was probably similar. And I'd already been doing Salesforce for some time. So I know times have changed a little bit. There's like, I don't know, what, 40 certifications out there, something crazy. And it was way less when I first started. So, kick it back about almost 5 years now. And so I didn't even have a certification yet. And I was able to kind of wrangle myself into an admin job without it. And it was at a startup company. And so I started getting some hands-on experience. So I think as far as like the timelines of maybe when I committed to actually studying, it's a little skewed because I was also like learning actual Salesforce and doing like business requirements. I think where it tripped me up, if you do happen to be in that case where maybe you have been doing some of that, I know obviously we kind of kicked off this conversation with that type of idea, which is maybe you do know some of the technical stuff. I think the hard part for me was when I took that test, I didn't know the best practices. So I knew multiple ways to go about maybe solving an answer, but I wouldn't know exactly like, oh, this is the way you should do it. And so the first time I ever took it, I didn't study at all. I had been maybe doing Salesforce hands-on for like 4 or 5 months. And I was just like, oh, they have these certifications, like I'll just go take this. And I remember I was telling like a guy at work that I worked with, and he was like, have you studied? Like, have you been studying? And I'm like, shouldn't be that hard. Like I've been doing like all this admin stuff, And then he's like, okay. And you could kind of tell like he wasn't going to like burst my bubble. I went and took it, failed it miserably. And then I was like, oh man, I guess I should have studied for that. So that was like a good waste of $200. And then after that, I did a lot of studying after that. And it was probably, even with my experience, it was still maybe a month and a half that I committed to, of like, okay, I'm going to take a Focus on Force test, like in practice, like maybe once every night or something like that. And so mine was probably pretty similar. And that was with hands-on experience. And I think for me, like I said, what I like about trying to get certified first, like what Brandon's done, is you kind of get yourself out of that area of where you're going to form these bad habits in your mind, because that was the difficult part for me. Like I keep saying, is Okay, yeah. And so that would get confusing. I'd read a question. I'd be like, well, technically I could do it either one of these ways. And then it's like, well, I have no idea like which one's the right one to choose though. So it kind of helps, I think, to do it early because you learn the best practices first. And then going into your job, obviously you can see how that's going to be beneficial because you're going to choose the best practice. So I think that's super solid. And I saw a question real quick here. So let me hear you ask that before I go on to the next. So shoulder-based practical exercise. Okay, yeah, that's a good one. So Brandon, what do you think of that in the chat? It looks like there's a question here around like your trailblazer stuff. Like, so if you got on a trailhead, how much did you feel like that resource helped you out versus focus on force?
So I feel like Trailhead kind of laid the foundation of what I learned. It kind of, walks you through scenarios, how to build stuff, where Focus on Force was more kind of more in the weeds on the information of kind of the why behind the what. So it just kind of rounded out the areas maybe that you didn't go very far or very deep in. On Salesforce, it was more just, hey, we're going to do this thing and knock it out and create this app or whatever. But like, why am I actually doing these things? So that was kind of the difference. And I think having both is very helpful because it kind of supplements of like the doing versus, kind of the learning side of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I would probably piggyback on to answer that same question is I felt the same way, whereas, I'd done some trailhead, obviously I had work experience, and I think that is good, like Brandon just said, to kind of give you some more of the why. But it didn't necessarily help me in the sense of like how to read through the question and what they're going to kind of try to ask me and the scenario behind it. In this instance, for me at least, I felt like the best way to get good at it was honestly to just like take the tests and see what the format was going to be like. But that's a good question. Does that, let me know in the chat, I guess, Fernando, if that answered your question for you. On that same note then, Brandon, you used Focus on Force. Did you just end up using just the study guide or just the test? Did you mix both of them together? What were the resources you used?
I used both. I went through, because I did Trailhead first, and then I jumped right into Focus on Force. So I went through the study guide first, and it was covering a lot of the stuff that you learn in Trailhead, just like I said, kind of going down in the weeds there. And then once I went through all of that information, which I think I probably spent more time doing that just because there is a lot of information to really kind of go through.
Yeah.
Then I started taking exams, and kind of what I would do is I would, take an exam, see the areas or questions that maybe I didn't do so hot on, go back to the information to make sure I kind of dig in and make sure I understand, those concepts, retake. And that really seemed to kind of work for me.
Okay, cool. I think that one's pretty cut and dry. I know Mike asked that one, so I just wanted to kind of round that one out. You kind of talked about also which ones were most helpful. Let's see what else he had here. Oh, this is a good one. He asked, which resources would you avoid if you were to do this over again? Were there some where you felt like, it's kind of a waste of my time trying to use this, or did you feel like all of them kind of played a part?
Yeah, I mean, I really focused on, I did use somewhat the Mike Wheeler Udemy admin course. He's very similar. I think you could go that route or go Focus on Force. I decided to go and really kind of focus on the Focus on Force account because it had the practice exams with it. And that to me was more important than just kind of walking through, Mike's course, you just kind of walk through. He kind of walks you through the why behind the what, and he's just kind of talking and clicking and doing stuff, which is great. You just don't get that kind of, like you said, kind of live test taking mode with that course. I think all three of those are the three that I used, and I don't think I wasted time on any of it. I think it was all very beneficial and kind of helped round out my, my knowledge of the system. So
cool. Yeah, and how about let's talk about that real quick, what you said with like the mental side of it, because I know at least for me, when I took mine, I think there is this element that people don't talk a lot about when you take certifications. And I don't know if like other people are just like excelling way more than me, or if like it's just something that doesn't get brought up. But it seems like when I go and take a test, there is a very real element of like, okay, yeah, I may know this stuff and I might be able to remember it and all that, like I've studied for it. But then I felt like when I took those practice tests and I went and took the actual test, this was before they were super lenient on taking it from home. So before COVID happened, they actually really tried to push you to go to like a testing center. So I actually had to like go out to like a local college area and go to a testing center. So I'm like in it, I'm waking up early. Like I felt like I was back in school again because it's just like, I got to go take this test today, whatever. And so for me, there was like all this other element of like that kind of anxiety behind it. And then also when I took it, I felt like for me, it was like mentally fatiguing because it's just like 60 questions back to back. You're on a time restraint. And so when you're going through them, it's like just a lot of thinking for that time period. So I felt like for me, when I was studying too, one side of it that people don't tend to talk a lot about that I think is important is like getting those reps in, like you said, Brandon, of, taking the test. Cause I think that for me, at least helped me like get prepared to be like, oh man, like this is how it's going to feel as well. Like when I get in that testing center, like it's going to be kind of strenuous to like go through this and take that much time to sit there and think about it that way. Did you feel similar or?
100%. So I was a college athlete, and
Okay.
the nervousness that I felt going into that test was very similar, like competing in a big event. Like it was ridiculous. And I don't, maybe that's just me. But I was super nervous going into it. I was like, I knew how much time I spent on it.
Yeah.
And I, preparing for it. And I, there's no, if you fail the test, it's somebody messaged me and told me this like ahead of time, like worst case scenario, you fail the test and now the areas that you need to focus on and you go learn it, you retake it again. But in the back of my mind, I just was like, I don't want to fail this thing. I've worked so hard to do this. And yeah, man, it was mentally and physically, like, it was strenuous. I'll say that. And when I was done, I was so glad to be done. But yeah, I was tired. it was no joke. So
yeah. I felt the same way. Okay, good to know. So yeah, like I said, that is something that just throw out there for people listening is like, there is this other element, right? Which is like, yeah, you got to know it. But that's why in this course, that's why I specifically say on my take of how to do it is similar. And the same thing I told Brandon when he studied for his, which is like, if you were to just go into focus and force, and if that's the material you're buying, like right off the bat, or as soon as you can commit to it, just take that test and take it like it's real, because that's going to set that tone to be like, okay, what do I know and what do I not know? But then also, man, this is like how it's going to feel like. So when you get in there, you're not feeling like you got caught off guard of like, oh man, this was a lot more than I was expecting with it. So just wanted to kind of give that as a call out.
Jordan, can I piggyback some real quick? I would say too, one of the suggestions that was really helpful for me is because there is so much information, is to focus on, Salesforce does a really good job of telling you where the weighting of the test is going to be as far as where most of the questions are going to focus on. So there's two sections that are like 45 or 50% of the test.
Right.
Right off the bat, I need to know these. If I know these two sections really well, like there's 50% of the test right there. So, so that, and that's kind of what I tried to, even if I wasn't doing so well on tests and like some areas that were like, 7-8%, I'm like, okay, like I can live with that as long as I'm doing, very well on the sections that are heavily weighted. So that kind of took some of the stress off of like, I gotta know all this stuff. You need to know as much as you can, but really focus in on, that the heavily weighted areas.
Yeah.
So
thanks for calling that out. I forget about that. And that is an important part because like Brandon's saying, and that's kind of the point of taking it early so that you can kind of see like, where did I fail? Where was I good at? Because yeah, like to Brandon's point, if you're really great at, the bulk of the test, okay, well then spend a little more extra time on maybe the next biggest areas. But it's the same idea. If you miss a lot and you look back and it's like, okay, well, that was worth like 3% of the test. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe you want to spend some time on it depending on what your goals are, but at the end of the day, you don't need like 100% to pass this thing, right? Like, so I guess like kind of use your time that way. And that kind of goes into the next question that I guess somebody had here. And it was, how did you remain focused and waste the least amount of time as possible when you were studying?
I just try to go through the information kind of in a chronological order. They broke it down by, like the weighting of the tests. So I just started at the beginning, kind of worked my way through it. And I think this kind of piggybacks on another question that we talked, and I think I failed to mention this, Jordan, as far as like time, how much time. So my goal, like I mentioned earlier, I've got 4 kids and a full-time job. So I don't, I'm like getting up at 5 a.m. and studying until like 7 when the kids get up. And then I'm like, kids go down at 8. Okay, now I'm studying again. So I didn't have a ton of extra time. So I was trying to be as efficient as possible. But my goal every day was to try to get an hour to 2 hours in. If I could hit that number every day, I felt really good. Like maybe I'm not making as, much progress, and I had to put my blinders on, from all the people on LinkedIn, because you see people just like, boom, certification, boom, certification. You're like, man, I'm a loser. Like what the, like it's easy to feel that. It's not true. Yeah. Don't believe that. But yeah, now that was my goal, is just, I'm just going to take my time and go through, spend an hour to 2 hours a day, just going through the information chronologically. I'd finish it, because the cool thing about the focus on 4 stuff is you can finish a section and they actually have tests specifically about that section. So there's like 60 questions about that particular section, when in reality on the test there are maybe 20 questions or something. So you kind of really get forced to learn that information. And then when I went through all of the information, I started taking the full tests. And I think I remember you saying this on LinkedIn once, Jordan, about how after you took your initial test, you actually went in to start it. They have down at the very bottom there, they have an option to just take like a quick 20 question exam that's, that has it's weighted the same way as the normal test as far as the number of questions. And I found that actually very beneficial as well, because it was way less mentally exhausting, going through that test. And I try to treat every test like the real one. And if you're doing that, man, you're kind of getting amped up and ready, and it can be exhausting. So that was a helpful thing for me as well, that I could take 2 or 3 of those, like take a break, without just feeling like I was like, dude, my brain doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, that's pretty much spot on, like how I felt too. And that's why I recommended that one, is because same idea. So when you guys go in there, like Brandon mentioned, I don't know if you guys have bought the material yet or not, but focus on Force. There's basically 2 things you buy. There's one thing that's a study guide, and I think they're both $19 each. And then the next one is the actual like practice test. When you buy the practice test, it comes with, and maybe Brandon can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 6 full practice tests that are all different. And then you have this one at the end that is like 20 questions. And from what I remember, at least taking it, it seemed like it mixed up those 6 and would just pick out like 20 questions from that. And to Brandon's point, like you said, to answer this question too, is I felt like that was a lot more like useful of my time. I felt like it helped me prepare more. It helped me like be able to commit to it more frequently, because I took that actual test, like the mock-up test, maybe like twice, maybe 3 times. And then the majority of my time was at 20. And it was the same reason. It was just like trying to find time in my day and like the one after work to be like, okay, let me gear up for like, literally it's going to at least take me an hour, like to get through this thing and actually take it like it's real. So that was just difficult to do and wanting to do it. But the 21, you can do a lot quicker. It's still weighted the same. And then for me, I took that test until I was getting like consistently around like 90%. And then when I went and took my test, I felt like, okay, yeah, these seem very similar to the questions I'm used to. And I felt really prepared doing it that way. So kind of the answer there. The next one's going to kind of feed into some stuff outside of certification stuff. So I'll pause real quick on some of the questions that Mike had that he listed out for us. Let me see if there's anything else. In the meantime, is there anyone that wants to put in the chat or go off mute for a second and ask Brandon anything?
Again, I would just agree with you, Brandon, that the test taking is really, really helpful. I took the test out of the gate without doing any studying to see how I do. And, the first time was 45%. And then when you figure out the trick questions, because I haven't taken multiple choice tests in, 30 years. So once you understand the questions and how the questions are framed, and that you have to really read them carefully because they're trick questions, right? And you take it a second and third time, you'll find that your score really improves, and that's then helps you really focus on which parts you want to go learn on. And Brandon, to your point, I didn't pay attention the first time, but where's the weighting? It's been a long time since I paid attention to tests. And the weighting is important because you're right. You could pass the test by just understanding the heavily weighted areas. And then if you didn't get some of the other answers right, it wouldn't be as painful or difficult. So those are all really good points.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for putting those out there. Just to kind of piggyback on that too. Yeah, that is one thing we didn't actually talk much about, right? Which is they are kind of tricky questions. They are kind of designed in a way like we touched on a little bit, which is they're scenario based. It seems like when I took it, there was multiple questions that felt like there could be an answer to both of these that you could technically do it that way. But it wasn't, maybe best practice on the 2 out of the 3. So yes, it's multiple choice. Yes, every single question is that way. But to everyone's point here is their goal in a way is to really test to see if you know the best practice behind it. And so those can kind of get you tripped up on that. So that is a good call out, something we didn't really talk much about. Let me see, is there anybody else that would kind of like to pipe up or put something in the chat? Otherwise, I'll kind of move on to some of the other questions that were listed on our feed here.
Yeah, Jordan, if you don't mind, I'd like to,
Yeah.
I just kind of have a general question because this is, for me, or for a lot of us, I'm sure, going from a different industry to this, it's such a big thing. It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around like what you're looking at and what you're dealing with. And I think for me, so like switching into that. So for you, Brandon or Jordan, whoever, like, when do you feel like you know enough to where you're like, okay, I'm ready? Like, I'm sure there's things that, you're going to continually learn for forever or whatever. But like, when do you feel like, okay, I've covered is that, a certification, or is that, focus on for like, what does that look like? Like, okay, I'm confident now to actually get that position. Cause I know there's some people that have got it, Jordan, like yourself, before you got a certification, you got a job. So like, what does that look like?
Yeah. Brandon, do you want to answer first and then I can go, or?
I was hoping you were going to go first.
Okay, I can go first. Okay, so my answer to that, Jared, for you is, yeah, I know it's a little bit different climate now. When I took it, I want to say, and maybe I'm way off, but I wanted to say that there was maybe like 12 certifications at that time, whereas now there's like 40, right? So there's so many like new features in Salesforce in general, so many more things they've added on. And my career along that way has kind of played this weird route because it's increasingly like more difficult to just like come in as an admin and be like, yeah, I'm an admin and that's what you are. Like what's tending to happen now is they're hiring people out for specific specializations. So even the team I'm on right now, it's a startup and we don't have many people here. And we just hired someone specifically to like look over our service cloud for Salesforce. So she's going to come in as a service admin. I don't know all of her, credentials or anything like that. I know she starts on Monday. But like specifically, those are the kinds of like tickets and things that she's going to watch out for. And like I said, it's kind of becoming that way because back in the day, right, like you had a lot less features, you had a lot less products, you had a lot less going on. And so the admin role specifically, you kind of just came in and it was like managing their Salesforce instance, which in most cases was either going to be, if you worked for a customer service place, it was like, okay, they got Service Cloud and I'm just kind of watching over that. And then in most cases I've been in, if it's like a SaaS company, tech companies, more likely than not, they're going to be using the Sales Cloud. And so if you don't know any of those things right now, don't worry about it. Basically, Sales Cloud is just like your typical Salesforce. So anything that you're doing on like Trailhead right now, more than likely they're having you do it inside of Sales Cloud. So like 99% of every Salesforce I've personally been in has been Sales Cloud. And so you would just get in and this is like what you do. And so I kind of strung on point here, Jaron, to just basically say, it was a little bit different for me. And so I do have that empathy for all of you. My wife, as of yesterday, what her path was is she was an underwriter for real estate. And so she was doing that for a while. Obviously, as you guys can imagine, kind of up and down with the market, depending on what's going on with it. And so she kind of went through a couple difficult jobs and then decided, hey, like, why don't I just do what you're doing? And so I would say she probably started committing, and I would say this is also very different from all of you in the community, in the timeline of things and how much she's put time into it. But it's been within a 6-month period still. And she's put in time to like do a couple super badges and certifications. And she was able to find herself in some footing to take on some junior admin consulting. And that was kind of cool. And Jaron, I know you asked this the other day in our DMs about like how you can maybe do this and what you could post. And so she took on some consulting as a junior admin, and it was like very, very minimal. Like we're talking like 5 to 10 hours a week. So it's not like anything super significant. I think she was getting paid $70 an hour though to do it. And so it's still like a nice little check that came in when she do it. And more importantly, I think what that did for her is build up the confidence to be like, get that scariness out of the way, to be like the unknown, right? Because when you take on a new job, I know when I took my first job, I was like, crap, man, like I'm signed up, like I guess I go in and like they either fire me or I figure it out. And like for me as a person, like that's more what I'm okay doing. Like I'm okay taking that risk. Also have probably a lot less that you guys might have to worry about, right? Like I don't have kids. I'm earlier on in my career, like all this stuff. So it's like I'm okay to take a little more risk in doing that type of thing. So for me, that's how it was too. And I think for her, it was the same thing. And as of yesterday, she ended up landing a full-time role as a Salesforce admin. They kicked it off to her at 60K. We were able to negotiate that to 72K. And she doesn't have a certification still. And so same type of thing, but she's in that same realm where she's like, what do I like? I start now, you know, like I can, and like one of the days of the week, I think she has to go into the office. It's a hybrid role. And so what's kind of been helpful for her on the consulting is she knows that like, if she had questions, she could just like ask me at home. And so she's like, if I go in and they ask me something like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, but it's like any job, you know, like don't psych yourself out. Like every job that we've all taken, it's the same situation where it's like, I don't know how to do this. And they're going to be understanding of that. And so I think in our heads and what we see a lot on LinkedIn is this idea of like, people are just crushing these certifications. People just know how to do Salesforce. They're dominating it. But the reality is that they're not, because Trailhead gets you so far, certifications get you so far. But from my own personal experience of 5 years, right? Every company that I've been to, and I've been to 4 different ones in the last 4 years, every single one I've went to, it's taken me, 3 to 6 months to ramp up. Because yeah, I know how to do it, but it's so customizable. So each company is going to use it different. They have it built different. They have a whole different process of how they sell their product. And so there's always this learning curve of like, okay, I might know how to like create a field, which is, something you will all know how to do by the end of the course. It's like simple stuff like that. But the learning curve is more in where they're lenient. What I've seen in my experience is they also know that you're brand new to the company and you don't know how their processes work. So kind of a long way to just basically say, don't psych yourself out on it with that. It's super natural. We all do it. Like I said, my wife's doing it right now. I did it when I started. I don't think you're ever going to feel ready. And I know that's super cliche to say, but I don't think you're ever going to go into a job where it's brand new and you're like, yeah, I'm just ready to do this thing. Because there's always, even if you knew all the technicality behind it, even when I take a new job, I still feel that way. Because when I go into it, I know that there's this learning curve of like, well, I have no idea how they operate. I don't know what my manager is going to be like. I don't know what my team's going to be like. I don't know what their expectations are. Like you play this game with the company the first few months of like, what can I do? How do I do it? Like, what do they expect from me? And so no matter what, even right now, I still feel that same way if that's helpful for you. Does that answer your question, or was that just kind of a lot of mumbo jumbo and didn't really do anything?
No, that's for sure. Cause that's just like,
Okay.
Yeah, that's spot on. You're good.
Okay, cool. Brandon, is there anything else you wanted to ask? It's like you've been going through it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great question, Garen. I think for me, getting my certification was confirmation for me that like, hey, I have a baseline of understanding how the system's supposed to work. And I'm smart enough and I'm stubborn enough and work hard enough that, you know, I feel like I may not be an expert, but I feel like I can get in there and figure it out. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. And Jordan's kind of spot on. You know, I'm in the process of interviewing for jobs, and I do get imposter syndrome just because I've never had a job before, so I don't know what to expect. And I know Jordan and I, you know, DM'd back and forth about that, but you know, he's like, at the end of the day, like, you know, yes, there are some technical stuff that you need to figure out, and then that you'll need to know. But a lot of it too is just the soft skills, like building relationships and getting to know people, and that I think plays a big part into it as well. So I feel pretty confident, you know, and I'm not saying this to be cocky. You know, just could have been, you know, whatever, you know, out of transitioning out of a real estate role, but I was able to get to the final interview stage on my first interview process, which was like encouraging to me. I mean, it was bummed I didn't get the job, but I was like, man, like I made it to the like final stage, and they wanted a guy that was killing it in flows, and that's just not me right now. I'm still learning that, you know. So there was a lot of positive out of that, and you know, all you can do is just keep trying, keep learning, and I don't know what you kind of always say, Jordan, it's kind of a numbers game, like, you know, like you just got to kind of get yourself out there, and you're gonna like, there are enough people and enough companies that are onboarding and using and need people that know how to use Salesforce. It's just finding that right fit and finding that, you know, that company that's going to give you that shot. So
Yeah, I just have a couple thoughts about that, because in the roles that we are in Salesforce, every 6 months you have a new customer, and we're supposedly the experts, and every customer is, even by vertical markets, because we're all in vertical markets now, they are the same but different. And so from a job search perspective, I think of it like lead generation in sales. You have to go figure out who your prospects are. And if you've got industry experience and you can find the industry that's similar to yours, you'll already speak the language. And the business language is probably the most important thing. There's a lot of admins who don't succeed because they can't do really good discovery, like ask the process questions and speak the business language. So when you're researching to interview, it really helps to go study up on what that company's business is, how they make money, how they want to succeed, what their success criteria are, and then relate that to what you're going to do for them with the technology, because the technology is there to make them more efficient, but how do they want to be more efficient? Where are the pain points? What's getting in the way of them making extra revenue if they're in sales, or serving their customer better if they're in customer service? So we call it soft skills, but I would call it more specifically know the business, learn the business. And if I came from real estate or I came from another business, and I've done this many times over the years, you find something that you feel good about, you're pretty familiar with, and then you just try to go next to it as close as you can. And then you'll feel less stressed when you get in, because now when you're discovering, it's just learning, how is this different from what I already know? And you know, we're doing it every 6 months, right? Doesn't matter how long you've been doing this, you're always learning. And you're never going to know all the answers, and you're going to try things. And then there's the whole change management where people don't want to change, and you have to convince them to change their process. And that's a whole set of skills too. So sometimes in your interview process, if you can talk about those things, they kind of won't care about your certification as much. They're going to care, is this a person who can talk to my business and convince them? Think about it like a sales job, right? To change how they do things. So there's just a few thoughts I had.
Yeah. And I specifically want to say on your last piece there, where you said, think of a sales job, because I was going to say the same thing, which is the more I feel like I have like pushed myself away from being like, well, I don't like sales, I don't want to be a sales guy, that's not what I do. like the harder it's made it on some of these soft skills that we're talking about, right? Because the end of the day, that's a lot of like what we end up doing. You're selling yourself to the company. You're selling yourself on that you're going to be a good employee. When you're on the job, you're selling yourself as I can figure this out and like I'm being proactive. And so there's a lot of like lessons within like the sales process in general that I think bleed over into this. So another thing there, Jaron, is like in my experience, it's been a lot more beneficial to get really good at that side of things. And something I've noticed that it's not a blanket statement, but just in my experiences, what I've noticed on teams that I've worked on, and this just goes for the development community, which is most people that take a development role have tended to be a little more introverted, and that's great. And a lot of their job, that's what it is. It's project based, right? And a lot of what Salesforce is similar. You get your project, you talk about it with your team for a little bit, you understand those requirements, and then you have a certain amount of time to get that built out, and then you ship it, right? So even for me right now, even though I'm an admin, it's the same way. We have 2 weeks. I get all my projects at the beginning of that 2 weeks. And then within that 2-week period of time, I'm spending just kind of building it out, checking in as I need to, and getting it shipped. And so you can be a lot more introverted in this industry. And so that's where I feel like that has been a super big advantage for me, because I'm willing to do all these things that are against the norm, right? If I was being as loud as I am right now on LinkedIn and doing what I'm doing, and I was in sales, I'm just like every other sales guy, because that's what they do every day, right? Like they're trying to market to people, they're trying to get clients, they're trying to figure it out. I think that's what set me apart in this, and specifically interviewing. And so when you're getting worried about all these technicalities, I guess I would say to fall back on that, because what I've seen in my experiences, it's like when I look around the people that I've worked with and in the development community, it's been big to be like, okay, yeah, like maybe I don't know as much as this guy that's on my team. Like he knows a lot more. He's got more certifications. He's super technical. But at the end of the day, like I'm willing to take the time to go to my manager proactively and say, hey, I don't understand this, or like we're not aligned on this. Or when they give me feedback, I feel like I do a really good job of like accepting the feedback, giving my perspective. I feel like I do a great job building relationships at work. So it's like, okay, I got to work with a stakeholder. Like I'm good at that. I'm able to like be a likable person and talk with them and understand their needs. And so all of that stuff, I think, ends up playing a really like long-term game for you, because it ends up being like, okay, yeah, maybe Jordan doesn't have all this technicality, but like, do people enjoy working with him? Do we know he tries to progress? Is he easy to work with? If those are all checked, it's like really hard for them to not want to work with you that way, right? And have more patience as you're trying to learn the technical side. So for me, that's why I think why I've always pushed myself more to be like, I want to develop those skills probably the most. And then obviously like the technical will come along the way. And that's always ended up being a really good thing for me, if that's helpful. Cool. Okay, so we're about 10 minutes away. I saw a couple things in the chat, so let me hurry and see those. I think Brandon, one of them. Do you mind suggesting that Udemy course one more time? Looks like there was a question around that. I can't remember. It was Mike Wheeler's, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And then did you ever use Francis Pinder, or just Mike Wheeler? Okay.
Just Mike Wheeler. Yep.
Okay, cool. Let's see if there's anything else in here. Okay, it doesn't look like it, just some comments. Okay, cool. All right, so a couple of the other questions for the last 10 minutes here. Once again, they're not super on the topic of certification. There was one here that is, what's the process been like as you've been job hunting? We kind of talked a little bit that you are job hunting. So I guess, yeah, can you go into that a little bit? Like you have your certification. Do you feel like that's been helpful for you as you've been job hunting or not?
Yeah, I think it was Bradley Rice, the talent sector folks, that I read something or heard something that I think 70% of the people that are currently looking for Salesforce admin jobs like have certifications. Yeah. So that kind of puts you in the top 70% to have that certification. So at least I feel like I'm in the top, the top 70%. So yes, I feel good that I have that. I would definitely not feel as confident trying to go after a job if I didn't have my certification. I just think that that's kind of where the market's at right now. I haven't interviewed and job searched in 5 to 7 years. So it's, I'm trying to get my legs back under me. I forgot how stressful it is, honestly. I mean, it's a good stressful because it's exciting, to kind of be moving towards, something you've been working towards and wanted to do now for 6 or 7 months. So yeah, I'm just trying to be patient, trying to get kind of the terminology I'm using with my wife, just trying to get my reps in. I know it's it's only a matter of time before I find a company that's willing to take a chance and say, we believe in what this guy can do. He may not be an expert right now, but and that's just kind of what I've been telling people. I may not be the most technical person right now, but I can tell you I've got phenomenal work ethic, and I will work my butt off, and I'll learn what I need to learn, and I'm pretty easy to work with. And so I think people appreciate the honesty, and so that's kind of where I'm at. I think having the certification is helpful. I've been on 5 or 6 interviews now and have a few more coming up. So, hoping that pans out here pretty quick for me.
Cool. Is there anything so far on this topic that you feel like we haven't covered that maybe you wanted to recommend to anybody here?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Those have been some great questions.
Okay, so the very last, very off-topic one that Mike really wanted to know here is what your favorite pizza was.
Oh, there's a joint right around the corner from my house called Mike's Pizza. Funny enough,
Even better.
The meat lovers, man, with Mike's blend crust is muy yummy.
Okay, sure he's gonna appreciate that answer since it's from Mike's Pizza. That's sweet. Okay, cool. Well, we're about out of time. We got about 6 minutes left. I would probably just say, I'll pause. Does anyone else have any questions? Otherwise, I'll kind of wrap up and tell us like what we can expect for our next event and stuff like that. Okay, cool. So as far as these going forward, I'll probably take a poll tonight or tomorrow. And then for all of you that joined live, if you want to just, give us a little thumbs up or thumbs down, how you felt like it went. Obviously, like what we want to do, I mean, this isn't for really like my benefit, right? Like you guys are all here. I'm trying to share what I know. So the more honest you can be and the more upfront and more active in the community, like it's only going to benefit you to do that, right? So I know that it's a little scary and it can kind of be like intimidating, but I guess what I would say and what I wanted to just reiterate since we've been in here for 2 weeks now is, we're all in this together. Like really what this place is supposed to be is a place for all of you to be able to come, and it's outside of all the typical stuff that you see. So when you get on LinkedIn, like Brandon said, I said, it gets kind of intimidating and you feel like there's certain questions that maybe you can't ask, or if you say the wrong thing, you're going to kind of get made fun of or whatever it is. The point of this community is it's all private, right? Like you all paid to get in here. And so the point of that is I'm literally going to be an open book for you the entire time, typically. And Brandon knows as well, he's done these with me, but it's like anybody outside of this is paying at least $150 for 45 minutes of my time to go over this. So in other words, right, like we're really spending time with you at least twice a month to do this live. And then obviously I've been active in all the DMs and on the feed. So any questions that you have, anything that you're worried about, whatever it is, don't feel hesitant to ask. And then to just reiterate once again, like this is a community. So yes, I have been trying to break that ice by like getting in here and like posting for you guys pretty frequently and sharing my thoughts on things that I think are helpful. But my goal and hope in the long term is like, I'm taking more of the back seat of trying to drive that for us. And you guys are the ones asking the questions. You guys are the ones that are supporting one another. So just wanted to reiterate that there's nothing to be afraid of. It's not like you're going to get questioned on anything. And if it is something that is like private, more private to you that you want to ask, feel free to DM me. You can always do that in the community too. So that's just a little a recap on the community, kind of where we're at. As far as these events go, like I said, I want to host these at least twice a month. And then we'll always try to put out a poll of like what we think we should do next. And then the more people that we can get to these live events, the better. Let me know, when we take the poll for the time, if you guys do prefer a better time that's a little more like in the middle for everybody, let me know on that too. It seemed like what we landed on was 50-50. Like it was either going to be early in the morning to accommodate everyone's time zone, or it's going to be after work. So for me, this one's a little bit easier. So if it ends up being 50-50, I'll just keep it at this 5. But what I have right now, if nobody else has any say, is there is somebody else that I have worked with and done a one-on-one with as well in the past. His name's Phil, and he has an awesome resume that he just built out, I think using Card as well. It works super smooth. He's got it kind of really dialed in. So I wanted to probably take our next event to go over like maybe the other side. So this side was more technical. I want to try to split it between those two. So we'll do one technical for the month and then like one more of like marketing yourself, because it's really a blend of both of those. So we'll try to get Phil in. He agreed to it, and then we can go over like the building out your portfolio and like his resume on there and how he did it and how he feels like that's been helping him so far. I think it's also kind of cool because if I'm not mistaken, I think Phil is a part of like the Talent Stacker group. So he might have some additional, insights from that community that he's been learning too. So prepare for that. I think that's going to be, I'll get a date out there, but 2 weeks from now, next Thursday is just what we'll shoot for, 5 o'clock. If there's any like say against that, just feel free to like comment it, like I said, in the community. And then other than that, these will also always get recorded. So this whole thing just got recorded. I'll try to get it edited up a little bit, and then, it'll be available for you in the community, and then we'll chop it up and like post it out there too. So, other than that, I appreciate you guys joining in on a Thursday, and we'll talk to you all soon. See you guys.